Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in. On behalf of all of us at the locally based, independently owned bookstore, Books and Books in Miami, Florida, and in partnership with Miami Book Fair, it's my pleasure to welcome you to a virtual evening with Halima Marcus to discuss Horse Girls, Recovering, Aspiring, and Devoted Writers Redefine the Iconic Bond, published by our friends at Harper Perennial. Halimah Marcus was born and raised in the Philadelphia area. She began riding horses at age 10 and competed in the equestrian sport of eventing until matriculating at Vassar College. She has worked for the Free Library of Philadelphia and is currently the executive director of the nonprofit publisher Electric Literature. She holds an MFA from Brooklyn College and lives in Sullivan County, New York. To moderate tonight's conversation, we're joined by C. Morgan Babst. Morgan is a native of New Orleans. She studied writing at Yale and NYU, and her essays and short fiction have appeared in the Washington Post, Guernica, Garden and Gun, and the Harvard Review, among others. Her debut novel, The Floating World, was named one of the best books of 2017 and was a New York Times editor's choice. We're also joined tonight by Sarah Enelow-Snyder. Sarah is a freelance writer who grew up in Spicewood, Texas, and has lived in the New York area for the last 15 years. She has bylines in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Condé Nast Traveler, High Country News, The Griot, and many others. Throughout this evening's broadcast, you're invited to ask questions by using the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the screen, and you can order your copy of Horse Girls from Books and Books below by pressing the green button. We appreciate each and every order and the generous donations from viewers everywhere. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much to Books and Books and Miami Book Fair for hosting us.
Our pleasure.
I'm Halimah Marcus, and I'm the editor of Horse Girls, joined by C. Morgan Babst and Sarah Enelow-Snyder, who we'll hear brief readings from in a minute before we get into our discussion. First, I just want to tell you a little bit about the book, which I have here, and which I hope you'll purchase from Books and Books. Horse Girls uses the horse girl stereotype as an entry point to talk about many different issues that affect girls and women, be those body issues, issues of power, ambition, race, class, shame, relationships, sport, bravery. It really unfolded to be this large topic that I initially wanted to investigate because I had so much unfinished business with this whole horse business. I quit riding when I went to college, and even when I was living in the city, I just continued to long for it. And then when I started pulling strings, it was just connected to all these other aspects of my life and all these other large themes. And those themes grew as the essays came in. So let's hear from each of our contributors. Maybe Morgan, you could start us off just because you're the one I see to my right with a reading from your essay, Turnout.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. I would be happy to read. I'll just read the first two paragraphs of my essay. My mother strides across a pasture, holding a jacket in one hand, a horse in the other. At the end of an arc of long line, the Arab is in mid-leap, his left hooves aloft, his right legs planted, all four topped in white socks that gleam from careful brushing. My mother's face is open, asking the horse something, and his eye is on her, answering, though his head tosses, throwing mane. It's 1964, my mother a young teenager in bell-bottom jodhpurs. She and that horse are bonded so closely that neither is at all afraid of the other. Though one of them carries a whip, the other's hooves flash in the air. The look that passes between girl and horse is respect itself. Each honors the power of the other. Each chooses trust instead of fear.
Thank you, Morgan. Is that Ruzan behind you in the picture, or is that someone else there?
That's actually Michael Korda, who was the legendary editor at Simon & Schuster, who I worked for the last 6 months of his career. And he gave me that picture because we used to talk about horses all the time.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, his wife is a serious 3-day eventer.
You learn something new every day. That's exciting, because that was my sport back in the day. Sarah, would you read from Racer Without a Pedigree for us, please?
Sure. This is Toward the Beginning. I took some group writing classes with a couple of girls my age from Marble Falls, Texas, which my father watched from the sidelines. The classes were led by a hardy, muscular horsewoman who introduced me to the idea of competing and taught me the ins and outs of Western shows, the rules of barrel racing, and what the judges looked for. She also introduced me to the idea that some girls ride English, jumping and doing dressage, wearing sleek outfits that reminded me of Banana Republic ads. This happened even in Texas, where Western culture is dominant. But that wasn't for me. I wanted to be a cowgirl. Being a Texan felt like an important part of my identity, and nothing seemed more Texan than being a cowgirl, a tough, capable woman who can do anything a cowboy does. I tried to ignore the fact that the images I'd seen of cowgirls did not feature any curly afros shoved into unaccommodating cowboy hats.
Thank you. So I'd like to start with each of you just kind of telling a quick overview of your story with horses, and leading to your contribution to this collection when you first thought of the term horse girls, what it brought up for you, and what in your initial rumination about your essay, what you wanted to write about. Sarah, if you'd like to start.
Sure. So I guess when I first saw the term horse girl, I mean, I encountered this project on Twitter and I read about it and I was like, that's me, but I'm not a horse girl. That's something else. My story is quite a lot about my relationship with my father. Riding was something that we did together for years. And he would take me to these competitions, and it was kind of a difficult relationship at times because he had very high standards that I had a lot of trouble meeting. So there was some push and pull there, but he would call me a horse woman. He never, ever called me a horse girl, even though I was 10, 11, 12 years old. But Halima, I knew what you were getting at, and I was like, this is me. I was like, I have something to say about this. And I knew that there were so few, non-white girls at these competitions that I used to go to. I don't want to say none, but few and far between, relatively speaking. And it was a great chance for me to delve into the history of 4-H, which I participated in, and the broader history of Black horseback riders, Black ranchers, that tradition.
What about you, Morgan?
I mean, the term horse girls for me was always sort of an insult that got flung at, my other horse girlfriends, when we were galloping around the playground. It was a bonding sort of an identity for us, though, because we were really outside of the fold. And I think that was it's interesting that Sarah's essay and so many essays have to do with relationships with our parents, who are also horse people, horsewomen. My mother was a very, very serious horsewoman and still is. She just got a new hip, and her doctor has just told her that she can get back on a horse. So she's going to go buy a young horse, and she's going to, she's going to train that horse, which probably means that I get to train a young horse, which is going to be fun. But it's probably the defining thing about my mother's personality, and something that I was raised inside of, that she expected it to be the defining thing in my personality, which required at times my fitting myself and my body into boxes that could not hold me. and into, my famous high boots, which I am still sad about. They're somewhere in a box all ripped up because at some point I got too big for them and I had to cut them open in the hunt field, which is kind of the climax of the essay. Writing was not something that remained like the main focus of my life. And I think that's a good thing to a large degree, but it also taught me so much, and I'm not sure that I would be the same person without it.
I love that the LA Times reviewer found your cutting the boots moment so triumphant. She said she wanted to jump on the bed. Because it is a triumphant moment, and it's very symbolic in terms of breaking free of these strictures and, like you said, the confinements that your body and also your spirit can't really endure. And both of your essays deal with appearances and the kind of expectations of appearances, which are, one might think, like, what does how you look have to do with writing? And really, what does it? And yet you both make an association between appearances and success. So, Sarah, you have a line that's about how you wanted to look like, the blonde cowgirl with her sleek hair. And then you write that that's what a winner looked like. And then Morgan, you have a line that's about, beauty came at a cost. You did all these things to be beautiful, but you had to be beautiful to win. Mm-hmm. So in your young minds, and then also looking back, like what was that association about? Maybe Morgan, you'd like to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think that particularly growing up in saddlebred culture, and then less so, but still in hunter culture, show hunter culture, like beauty is one of the primary things. I mean, you want your horse's ears to be perked up, and they do all these crazy things to saddlebreds' bodies to make their tails stick right up in the air and to make their necks all held in. And the rider has to follow suit. It's, there's so much about style in the way that the movement is judged, and in hunters as well. I think if I'd grown up as a show hunter, in a show jumping sort of a situation, or just somebody riding, doing, wrangling, it would have been a different sort of association. Though I was surprised when I went and worked on a ranch after college that the cowboys would come to me at like 5 a.m. with their different shirt options for the day and the different belt buckle combinations. Because aesthetics were very important for them too. I mean, horses are so beautiful naturally as animals. It's hard for us, even when we're riding them casually, not to want to try at least to be pretty like them, I think. Though, I mean, these days I go out to the barn in like disgusting old jods with holes in them and nasty paddock boots, and we schlop around, and it's much more fun.
Well, it's interesting about the cowboys because like they have something else that they want to communicate with their clothing, which is like their authenticity or their ruggedness. And Sarah, you were riding in a Western context, and still the presentation was this big kind of stressful issue.
It was. And I have to say, like, Morgan's essay, just like, it was like in my gut the whole time. I was like, yeah, that's what it's like. There's so much pressure. Where does this pressure come from? It's unbelievable, particularly because I got the impression that I was allowed to continue being a tomboy and do things like 4-H and barrel race. And I didn't need to, like being a rodeo queen is kind of different from what I was doing. I was like, I don't have to do that, right? I'm doing this other thing where I can continue to be like a not fully developed woman, but I couldn't escape it. It's just these messages that you get are just everywhere about your body, your hair, your face, every little thing. And I can't stress enough that for, preteen, high school age girls, you wouldn't believe the minutia that really does matter in the mind of that girl. It's incredible, but yeah, I had a hard time with the gender role aspect because I was much more comfortable, wearing boys' shirts, boys' pants, and not having to care. But then when I would get to a competition, I'm surrounded by girls who cared and showed up made up. So
yeah, the competition takes it to a whole nother level. I quit riding when I went to college, as I said, and I started up again around the time that I was working on this book. And I just did my first competition in since I was 17. It was a hunter jumper show. It wasn't what I used to compete in. And there was all these rules about how you have to look as a hunter that were different. And it was my helmet was wrong because it was the wrong type of helmet. And I was riding in half chaps because Morgan, I tried to get my old boots on and got about halfway up the leg and then got a cramp. And I was like, help, I'm stuck. But the specificity with how I was told to put my hairnet on or what saddle pad I had to use, which involved buying all this gear, which I didn't want to buy. So I just did it without it and looked like a doofus or, it was really challenging to say, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to look like I don't belong. And, just try to have fun. And I struggled to have fun. I was like, why am I doing this competition? It's I love riding, but as soon as you add the competitive element, it's it awakens a beast within me and all those old teenage insecurities and childhood feelings of not good enough, comparing oneself. And then Sarah, you write about the added level, like you said, of, being one of the only, if not the only biracial girl in the scene. And that takes it up a notch to another level.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I, for many reasons, could not have written this essay back then, but chiefly because I had no idea that there was a tradition of Black ranchers who ride horses that goes back, into slavery. I didn't know any of these things. This is not even close to being on the curriculum in the Texas school system. So I had a lot of learning to do, but it was just very awkward. And there was a lot of me trying to be something that I couldn't be, but it was all very misguided. So it took some years to let go of that terrible goal of being someone that you're not.
Right, an ultimately unachievable goal.
Yeah,
I'm glad you brought up the ranchers because it gets to this question of role models, and you both write about your parents who were role models in your equestrian lives. And then, so I'm curious about both, how they function as a role model, what the positive lessons were, and maybe the lessons you had to unlearn. And then also who the role models were outside of your family that you were modeling yourself after for better or for worse. Morgan, you want to take that one to begin?
I mean, obviously my mother was the horsewoman in my life for a long time. And I mean, it's funny, I have to drive an hour and a half out of New Orleans to ride these days because she's been in the horse world here for so long that she has beefs with every single person who owns a barn anywhere closer. And usually for really good reason, because she really, really, really loves her horses. Not that she has any right now, but she loves them deeply and cares about them a lot. And, the show barn that she was riding in where her saddlebred was that I write about, here, she was telling me the other day that one of the reasons why she got in a fight with the trainer is because she wanted her horse shod in a more sane, stable way. And he flipped out at her because she was the woman trying to tell the farrier what to do, and trying to do something that was safer for the horse. Whereas he wanted to do something that was going to win. she taught me how to care for them. But at the same time, like it was very important for her to win. It was, always really thrilling for me, like sports. It doesn't, like, that kind of competition doesn't do it for me. And so I never had the same drive, and I was forced, as I said before, into these competitive boxes that didn't really suit me. It wasn't really until I was an adult and I was working on a dude ranch after college that I met horse people who were with horses exclusively because they wanted to be with them, because they really enjoyed their presence and their company and the process of gentling them and training them, not breaking them. Like, breaking was a really, really bad word in the 2-year-old ring. Which was, the first time that I had heard anything other than that word for training a horse to be ridden. And my mother now too, with her friend Kathy, who runs this kind of foundling farm on the North Shore, an hour and a half away. Kathy takes in any horse that needs a home. She's got mini ponies and ancient donkeys, and also alpacas and a zebra. And just gazillions of sway-backed old dudes just wandering around the pasture because they're who she cares about. And I mean, that's the kind of horsewoman that I want to be.
And what about you, Sarah?
I was thinking while Morgan was talking, and I was like, God, I feel like a lot of my role models were men. I mean, I just, it was just sort of a lack of awareness. I mean, I watched an awful lot of John Wayne movies. I mean, I loved Lee Van Cleef, like that sort of strong, silent type seemed to fit with my tomboyishness. But I was also aware that there was like a thing that Texan women sometimes have. There's just this cowgirlish quality that's, as I had said in that reading, like tough and capable, can shoe a horse just as well as a man. And I was sort of vaguely aware of the existence of that woman. I remember when we settled where we did, at the time, Ann Richards was governor of Texas. And I was like, I didn't know the first thing about her. I was like, I bet she's that kind of woman. Yeah, she's a governor. She's going to be that type of woman. But I also had in my head, like, Dolly Parton is someone I should want to be like. She's incredibly successful. She's got a figure that is obviously what you're supposed to have. So I feel like, I don't know, John Wayne and Dolly Parton. I don't know.
Love it. Yeah, the horsewoman as a figure looms very large in my mind, and in my introduction as well, because a lot of role models or people in power in my life were men. But then at the barn, I had women trainers, and they were tough. And I think that that's a thing that, about horsewomen and horse people is that you pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, you get back on, you don't complain, you don't whine. And those lessons were all very valuable to me learning to ride. And I think that's part of why I bristled at the term horse girl so much and found it so objectionable, because it is kind of erasing all the aspects of horsemanship or horsewomanship that I found so productive. And yet there's this contrast between that kind of like toughness and the vulnerability of a horse and the gentleness, of teaching a horse that, that Morgan, your mom, sounds like she butts heads with when people don't have that balance in alignment.
Yeah, she does. And she takes that toughness very, very, very seriously. She just sometimes still, like, she'll wax my dad on the thigh when he's being annoying. He's like, stop, I'm not a horse. So, it's it's a big thing, that the way that you have to deal with a horse, it's like they're so much bigger than you are. And so gentle to them is not gentle to the people around you necessarily. It requires tack and elbows and cross ties and all kinds of things. Yeah, but I mean, it's true. We're really tough horse girls. We're so much tougher than your average other kind of girl. And yet the image is like of a My Little Pony kind of a pink person, which isn't, just not what we are.
Yeah. I know anytime I'm like dealing with a horse, put the halter on the lead rope, I'm like, can't believe this horse is letting me do any of this. Cause like if the horse decides no, you kind of can't have anything to say about it. Sarah, you have some good anecdotes in your essay about like horses cooperating or not cooperating with you.
Yeah, I loved my horse very much. He was kind and he meant well and he tried, but he was not always in ship shape. It was more than once that he was falling asleep in the ring. If we weren't like actively moving, is like, okay, it's nap time. I'm going to swat at some flies. All of that comes off very unprofessional. We had many moments like that. I kind of had to accept that, like, if you have a horse that costs like a few $100s, that horse is not in the same condition as some of the other horses that you're competing against. And actually, I at an old job that I had, I just randomly asked my coworkers, none of whom have horses or ride horses. I said, how much do you think a horse costs? And a couple of them went away and came back and they said $60,000. I was like, really? I didn't even say anything about this theoretical horse. So they were like, $60,000 sounds about right. I'm like, well, I would have a different essay, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is you could get a horse for free, like Kathy's taking in all these horses for free. Mm-hmm. You can get paid by the government to take a wild Mustang, and you can surely spend $60,000 and more on a horse. So that's like also part of the range of experience. I mean, I didn't get to necessarily represent that upper range of experience, and that wasn't what I was after, but the range of experience of relationship that you can have. So I'm wondering, Sarah, you're at the show, you're trying to do well, you're not winning, and Leo's falling asleep. There's a little bit of like an identification that happens with the horse. Did you find that? Like, I'm just like Leo, or like we both can't get it right, or whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, I did consider us to be like peers. And yeah, I mean, I think he had his limits and I had my limits. He was never going to perform robotically well. It didn't matter how long I spent with him or how many times we ran through these exercises, or even with speed, like how much practicing we did with barrel racing. He just had his limits, and I felt the same way about myself. I was like, I don't look like Dolly Parton, and I'm not going to, and my hair doesn't do these things, and yeah, I have a hard time with the barrette, the hairnet. Like, I have a hard time with that, and I need to start accepting, who we are together as a team.
And Morgan, in your essay with Ruzan, your mom's horse, like you begin with these anecdotes about her galloping along the Mississippi and Ruzan eating all the azalea bushes. And that's like another narrative of like the mischievous free spirit, that they both kind of had the same personality. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, it's kind of like the beginning of 101 Dalmatians, where the dogs and the people are walking down the street and they all look the same. I mean, I feel like Sarah, like Nate was similar. Like when I was reading about Leo. I was like, oh, he sounds like Nate. He sounds like such a sweetheart. I want to give him a hug. Yeah, Nate was very much like me, a little bit unmotivated. If we didn't have to do a flying change, why would we do a flying change? That sounds hard.
Yes.
And why would I put on spurs to make him do a flying change? It's mean. So yeah, I mean, I do think that you have these relationships with them where you really do, like, you become sort of one entity, almost like sort of a centaur, but like a female version of a centaur. Why is that not a mythological beast, by the way?
And centus.
Yeah, there should definitely be a centus. Yeah, but the and then Pecos, who was the horse that I took home from the ranch, because I was the only one who would ride him because he can buck without giving you any warning whatsoever. And he was 7, and so he was no good for the dudes, and so they were going to sell him to this ranch that rode horses into the ground, and I paid $300 for him, and traded one of the cowboys like the money to fix his truck for him driving him home for me. And at that point, I was like Pecos too. I was like, if you piss me off, you're on the ground. Yeah, I think that it's important to identify with them to some degree, though it certainly makes it hard if you're in the competitive horse show world, because people eventually sell their horses, and it's really sad.
Yeah. I at the barn the other day, still riding this same horse, Woody, that I read about in the introduction, who's older. And this woman said to me, well, he didn't get to that age by expending extra energy.
Right.
That's right. So we're going to start taking questions soon if you would like to start putting them in the ask a question box. But I'm also wondering if the chat could be enabled, because I see that it's disabled. So I don't know if that's possible in the back end. Oh, look, there it is. So you can ask your questions in the chat there or in the ask a question box, and I'll take them as they come in. Shifting gears a bit, I wanted to ask, you're both moms. And Sarah, I'm not sure if you have a daughter. I know you have a son.
I have one son.
Okay, you have one son. Have you thought about, if your child and Morgan, you're already introducing your daughter to riding. And so, Sarah, if your son was to express interest, is that something you would encourage or try to turn his attention elsewhere?
Oh, I would be down for that. I mean, I would have to deal with the flood of teenage feeling, whatever it is that I haven't resolved for my teenage years is going to come like flooding back, which is fine, whatever. But yeah, I would be happy to teach him about this kind of thing. I mean, I'm really, and by the way, he's about to be 2, so he's a little ways off. But I'm big on celebrating Black people in all forms of outdoor recreation. I feel like this is kind of little appreciated. So, swimming, hiking. I hate fishing, but if he wants to fish, that's fine. I'm down for all that because it really, all of those things are Black things. Some people just don't realize that. Historically, there are so many ties to the land. I mean, gardening. I mean, all of this stuff is running through all of our family trees. It's just that, after the Great Migration, when people really relocated from the rural South to the urban North, some of those memories may have gotten lost in the shuffle, but it's all still there. So yes, I would absolutely take him riding.
Love it. Yeah. And you write about how, Black people have been pushed out of those spaces, but there is more representation in popular Instagram accounts or with like Compton cowboys and their Black cowboys and cowgirls in different cities. So it's great that your son can hopefully see those things and then maybe be drawn to who knows what rock climbing, and you'll be like, wherever you draw the line, it gets too dangerous. You'll be like, well,
there's a group for all of it. There's brothers who climb. There's like literally everything. So yeah, maybe not fly fishing. I'm gonna draw the line.
Oh, that's where you draw the line.
Yeah.
We have black cowboys down here who've been marching in Mardi Gras parades lately. And
that's wonderful.
Sometimes you'll see them like galloping down the neutral ground in random times. I'm like, oh, it's the way my mom grew up.
Good. I love that. I love it.
And Morgan, how are you thinking about the whole riding thing with your daughter?
Well, she really enjoys it, and I do think that it's great for kids to grow up with horses. I think it teaches you so much about what you are capable of, and how to be with other living creatures who aren't, dogs and cats, and how to communicate with animals. She has a lot of fun, and it's really nice now. We can just go to Kathy's and ride whatever. So I don't even have to keep one myself. But I'm not super keen on getting her into the show horse world. My cousin is a very accomplished rider in hunter jumpers, and she's got a $60,000 horse from Germany. And I'm not interested in getting into that, the bank account measuring competition. It's like, it seems to defeat the entire purpose. I wish that there were better, closer places here for us to go out in the woods and ride, or that we could, if we could just ride along the levee for a long time, that would be lovely. But we go every other weekend or so and have a nice time.
We have a couple questions coming in. Do you think that the stereotypes are still as strong now? Do you think it will ever change? It's definitely a wealth factor, but to have it at a lower local level. So I think the question is, are the stereotypes perhaps changing more at these lower levels outside of the high show levels, or just generally?
Gosh, I don't know if I know enough about showing now to know about the competitive world, but I would like to think that just the existence of the internet and social media has raised a lot of awareness. I can't tell you how quickly I realized how many other Black riders there are. I just didn't have an avenue for discovering it. So I would like to think that the dissemination of information over time has changed something, but I would not be surprised to learn that, the fundamentals of competing are still the same. I mean, like you said, you had the wrong saddle pad, you had like the wrong helmet, all those little details that you get judged on. I wouldn't be surprised if that stuff was all the same.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting with this book, which, my primary goal with it was to just complicate and broaden who can be involved in this community, and also what we're allowed to talk about within it. And it's been really interesting since the book's been out only a couple weeks to hear from people about how much they relate to it and how much they relate across essays. So across, someone who didn't have the same kind of upbringing or doesn't have the same identity as them, but there's something like in the emotional core of a relationship to horses that brings all these people to this sport or this pastime, or however you want to think of it. There's something that I do think is, kind of elemental or a commonality there that does get lost, but it also gets simplified because I think a lot of us have felt complicated about it over the years, and that's why so many people leave and come back. And it's not just for logistical reasons, although those play a huge role, financial, logistical, but also, figuring out what role it has in your life. So I do hope that this book, contributes to some dismantling of stereotypes, although I don't expect the horse world to throw out these traditions or these expectations, but maybe the conversations could be a little more free.
I saw on Twitter somebody said that they were reading the book on their show trunk in Tulsa, I think, at a show. And I was like, I can see it being sold at shows and everybody being like, wait, what are we doing?
Like, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah. You just destroy it. It's over.
And that's not my goal either.
No, I know. I'm teasing.
So, yeah, that's funny. Love it. Someone asked if Horse Girls is appropriate for tweens, to give it to a friend's daughter. And maybe Morgan, another friend asked the same question for a 10-year-old. And I thought it was, although a lot of it is like looking back on girlhood, it may be interesting for a tween to reflect on it. What do you both think as parents to that question?
Yeah, I think that it might not connect with kids younger than like 12. But I feel like as a 13-year-old, I would have loved to have had it.
Being like, it's not just me.
Yeah.
And so I can get a broader sense of what horse girls are like.
I mean, I just feel like I would have killed for this information then, but that's just me, and maybe I wouldn't have. I'm not sure. Like, my first instinct is like, yes, every tween should read this, because look at our collective knowledge. Look at what we've learned from all this. It took us like years to put this together. Like, here's the answers. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
But maybe not. I don't know.
Right. We all lack perspective as teenagers is one of the problems.
So, I mean, reading wise, it always depends on the kid. Like, I was reading like Madame Bovary at 14 and whatever, and needed it.
Right.
So.
And I'm sure you were getting something different out of that than you would get reading it now.
For sure.
This is true.
But the window into the adult world is exciting, and the adult opinions. So, but there's no like content warning type of thing that I would issue to a tween. I mean, it deals with real life issues, with people whose parents have died, or, people with cancer, eating disorders. But, nothing that I think a tween wouldn't already start to be aware of in the culture, I think. So I've been asked how I picked the writers who were included in the book. And I started with my networks of, I'm an editor in my day job, so I know a lot of writers. And sometimes I would have personal knowledge that they were also had some involvement with horses. But I really did rely on a personal knowledge at first, because it's often not something that writers are advertising. It's often a compartmentalized part of their identity, even if they're doing it now, and especially if it's something they did in the past. And it was so important for me to have just like a really polyphonic exploration of this topic. And I wanted to come from all angles, in terms of sexuality, identity, race, ethnicity, regionality, like types of riding, age. And so I was, exhausted my own networks pretty quickly, and then started putting out calls through social media to get pitches. And Sarah, that's how you came to the collection. Morgan, I can't remember if you pitched or if we were introduced or something.
No, I pitched you too. I had weirdly just like woken up in the middle of the night with like most of the essay in my head and scribbled it down like in terrible handwriting in the dark. And then you put out that call, and I was like, what is Halima looking at me in bed?
So that was great, and it reached a lot of people. And, it was cool to build out the collection that way. And there are many, probably at least half of the writers came through pitches, I would say. And then the other half were people that I reached out to directly. And then I think this could be a fun question to end on, unless there's any others that come in. But do you have any, favorite books or films that feature horses from your childhood memories, or, the seminal texts in life? I just did a watch party of Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken with Kira Madden, who's a contributor to the book. And I hadn't watched that since I was a kid. It came out in the 90s, like 91 it came out.
I loved it so much as a kid. When I read the essay, though I'm not sure if I can watch it again.
Yeah, I know, because it's all about the cruelty of having these horses dive off these platforms. And it is interesting to rewatch it now and look into like the narrative that we bought into about that being glamorous. Even, it was a movie that came out in 91 about a practice that was happening during the Great Depression, like into the 20s. And now you look at it and you're like, yeah, that doesn't seem cool. But very glamorous, very exciting. Her horse was named Lightning. I named like all my pretend horses Lightning. So that's a big one for me. Which I think actually seems like the most unoriginal name to me now, Lightning.
I'm not sure that I read much involving horses. I'm really racking my brain. I feel like I was reading things about like a faraway place called Suburbia, where people babysit one another. I feel like that was a lot of my reading.
Babysitters Club.
Yeah, I watched Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken, and I thought, oh yeah, diving with a horse. That's something people do, and this is where I'm learning it. That's a normal thing to do. And I might be like getting this completely wrong, but I want to say there was a movie called 8 Seconds about like bronc riding.
Oh,
my memory's very fuzzy, but that was maybe a little more up my alley. And I watched a lot of old Westerns that were frankly way before my time. They just so hallowed in Texas, I mean, the golden age of Western films ended ages ago, and you just keep watching them. But like True Grit was one of them, which involves girlhood. I've seen it in ages, so I actually don't remember too much about it. And I didn't see the newer one.
I've only seen the newer one.
Yeah, me too.
And Morgan, what about you?
Oh gosh, there's so many. My mother actually just recently gave Lise a new copy of a bunch of the Marguerite Henry books, like Misty of Chincoteague and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We started off reading Cinnabar, the 1 o'clock fox, which is so charming. It's about a fox in a fox hunt who goes out to the fox hunt to have fun for the day.
Oh, that's a rewriting of
skeptical about it. This is really, really adorable. And now I can't stop talking about Cinnabar and comparing everybody that I meet to Cinnabar. But Marguerite Henry is lovely. And now I feel like I have to reread all of the Misty books. And I had her full collection of the Black Stallion books, of which there are like 20.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, maybe they don't exist in reissues, but I had her books from the 60s that were all like, moth-eaten and the pages were falling apart, whatever.
Smelled great, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds sarcastic. I mean that earnestly, because that old book smell, like, it's great. And my dad's old Wizard of Oz books, it's like the same thing.
I think they died in Katrina, unfortunately, so Lisa can't read the same copies, but that's okay. Those were wonderful and thrilling. We were trying to watch The Black Stallion together the other day, Lisa and I, but we couldn't find it. I think it had just like dropped off of Netflix or something. But National Velvet is a favorite too.
Mm-hmm. Another young girl. I think the horse in Neverending Story that dies in the Swamp of Sadness was a seminal trauma in the RTAC, yeah. I was kept thinking I got Atreyu and then I got Valcor, and I was like, I'm not going to Google it right now. But
I had a Breyer horse who had reins on, and he was RTAX, and he was constantly getting, sucked into the Sea of Despond or whatever. And I would rescue him, of course.
But to this day, like if I'm watching Game of Thrones or whatever, they're going into battle and there's like always people dying, and I'm like, the horses. Oh no, not the horses. So I still have that in me.
Yeah.
Oh, any movie where the rider goes down because the horse went down first. Oh, it's horror. Like Braveheart. Oh God.
No, yeah.
Other reasons to be sad about Braveheart, but
the image of a horse falling is so unnatural, and you see, like, to me in those images, I see like just the years of cruelty. That's so. We'll just end on that positive.
But National Velvet's great.
National Velvet is great. We can all be reminded that she is Velvet. The horse is not named Velvet. The horse is named Pie.
That's right. Very important to know.
You know what else I saw recently is the Misfits with Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable. And there's a lot about like going after trying to capture wild horses in this film.
Really?
I've seen it. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful photography. It's black and white. Oh my gosh. It's really, really good.
I've never seen that, but I know it's like a great classic.
Probably one of Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe's best performances like ever in this film. So, and The Horse Whisperer, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, I rewatched that during this pandemic when I went on a big Robert Redford kick. I love that movie when it came out, and I still liked it a lot. The scene of the accident in the beginning is like still really hard to watch, but I love that movie.
Okay, well, I want to thank all of you for joining us on behalf of Books and Books, Miami Book Fair. This has been a wonderful conversation, so interesting, so illuminating. I think for all of the centuses out there, you've coined a new term.
Well, good thing I didn't try to call the book that, because I don't think
no, but it's so visual. It makes sense, right? So I don't know if you want to end with any horse wisdom.
Oh, horse wisdom, like what horses teach us? Is that horse wisdom?
I don't know. I think you can define it any way.
Well, the thing that horses have been teaching me lately is to value doing things that are for enjoyment and are and feed different parts of myself that are not for obligation and not for earning money and just completely outside, and placing value again in my adult life on those activities and making time for them.
It's beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay, I think we can end with that. Thank you so much. I just want to remind everyone watching, you can purchase a copy of Horse Girls from Books and Books Below. If you're in Miami and you want to come by one of our stores, we have it at all of our stores as well. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope we'll see you in person someday soon, maybe in Miami.
Hope so.
I'll come by to see you in October, I think.
Really? Good.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Good night.
Good night.